Hey everybody, welcome to today's live stream, and I'm very excited to talk about two topics today. The first is we're going to cover how China seems to be hinting and actually suggesting that they're going to ease the COVID lockdown restrictions under the umbrella of zero COVID. Whether that's true or not, we'll go into details, and then we'll talk about the upcoming Georgia Senate runoff election, which is happening on December 6th. So that's next Tuesday. And what's going to happen there, who's going to win, etc. We'll have all that detail later in the live stream. But welcome to today's live stream. Happy Friday. And if you enjoy the content so far, make sure to subscribe to our channel and it'll help us grow. Like our video, and then also make sure to comment below and turn on your notification bell. Comment what you would like to see covered next. All right, so let's talk about the question, right? Zero COVID, is it over in China? Right off the bat, I'll tell you the answer is no, because I think the result of what we will talk about today is actually, I think, a temporary easing of the zero COVID situation for the sake of pleasing the people who are protesting in China, just so that things don't go out of hands. But in the long term, I don't think we're expecting a big shift. Here's why. Okay, so let's go to our first article today. So recently, the Chinese president, Xi Jinping, he met up with the European leaders. I believe it is Charles Michel, who is the EU Council President of the European Union. And he says that this is what Xi Jinping says, quote, believes frustrated students are behind COVID protests, right? So he used the word frustrated. It's a very interesting word because he didn't say they are violent protesters or they are regime changers, or they're no mentions of foreign forces interfering into the protest of the students, which is a very public admission that the fact that whatever the state media were saying, how the US and other Western nations were involved in the protest students were putting on this week in Beijing and Shanghai and some other cities, basically the Chinese president, the Chinese leader said, well, those are not true. They're just frustrated because for 3 years these students have suffered under lockdown rules. So what exactly is China going to do next? Well, according to Xi Jinping, parts of China, especially in South China, they're actually relaxing some of the COVID rules. For example, like testing rules, lockdowns, quarantine, etc. Especially given that he said now the Omicron strain is much less severe, less lethal in his words, than some of the other strains. So let's briefly cover this first, and then we'll talk about a little bit more. So it says they're mainly students who are frustrated after 3 years of pandemic. And this is according to senior European officials, by the way. So this is not accounts of Xi Jinping himself. But just based on this, we do have indications that things are changing. So China's COVID czar says fight against virus entering new stage. And Sun Chunlan is her name. She's a very interesting character, okay, so to speak. So basically, before every city has a huge, long lockdown, Sun Chunlan, this COVID czar, has to show up in that city, and then the city immediately goes into lockdown. And this was pretty much the story for the last 3 years in China, right? When Shanghai lockdown happened, she showed up. When Chongqing, she showed up. Wuhan, she showed up. In Xi'an, she showed up as well. And we're talking millions of people under lockdown, right? So now she's the one who, of course, has to listen to Xi Jinping, but she's the one that says the fight against COVID has entered a new stage, while state media have downplayed its risks, bolstering expectations that Beijing is easing its anti-pandemic approach just days after a wave of unrest. So clearly you can see that the protests have generated instability within the party, right? My guess is the fact that Xi Jinping has gotten internal pushbacks from within the party saying that this is unsustainable, and if you let the protests keep happening, it is going to end up like June 4th, 1989, where you will eventually have to use force to make sure that the regime power and the regime stability maintains legitimacy, right? And of course, if June 4th, 1989 happened today in 2022, with our technologies and the ability to send off these videos to Twitter, the chance of China getting attention is inevitable, right? So I think there's a sense of violence is not the answer, as in it's the unthinkable to us, but it's the almost like the final contingency plan if things go south for the CCP. So they don't really want to use that force until it is necessary. That's why during the Foxconn protest, you see that they're more willing to use money to solve the issue, giving the people, the workers who were fed up, people who weren't getting the amount of money promised to basically send 10,000 yuan to their bank account, which is about $1,400, and that they're satisfied. They stop protesting, they go home, and things calm down. Here, they're really trying to make it so that the students and whatever protests that are happening in China stop immediately. So they don't want a second wave. But the question is China really going to pivot from its zero COVID policy, right? Which means mass lockdown, it means quarantine, it means mass testing, and it also means tracking via these COVID apps, right? I don't think so. And here's the reason why. One of the first reason is once you get so much control and maintenance of that control through the digital surveillance systems, like these apps on your phone, like the QR codes. And I'll show you here. There's a video that I found recently. I just got to find it real quick. Maybe it's this one. Nope. Did I delete the video? That would be really sad. Quarantine cams. Oh man, okay, I gotta find this video real quick. But basically, it's a bunch of people in Guangzhou, which is the area that they're actually supposedly eased from the mass lockdowns and whatnot. Like they're saying all the restrictions will be gone. Oh, here we go. Okay, so let me share this with you here. Okay, so this is a video. Let me just full screen this and I can show you. Okay, so this is a video showing all of the people holding up phones that shows a yellow mark. Some of them red actually. This is basically their zero COVID tracking app, right? So when your app turns red or yellow, you are restricted from taking public transit or going to restaurants or even going to the grocery store. So these people, they're allegedly from Guangzhou, and then according to, this is James Melville, the Chinese authorities can remotely switch the people's digital QR passport to yellow or red to stop them from leaving. Right? So in Guangzhou, basically they said you don't have to test every single day anymore. You don't need to get nasal swabs. But to go anywhere, to get into any places, you still need to have a green QR code, meaning that you still have to do all of your testing anyways. And here's another video, okay? So in Guangzhou, it says, on December 1st, Guangzhou was declared unblocked, but wherever you go, you need a 24-hour or 48-hour COVID test report. And you have to line up for 2 kilometers to take the test to prove that you're not positive. Okay, and this is the line that shows at one particular testing stations. This is just one of the first indications that really whatever the zero COVID situation is in China, it's not going to change a lot. Plus, think about it. If you have a QR code that allows you to control the movement of people in an authoritarian government, why the heck would you let that up, right? That amount of power and control up. And not to talk about the surveillance aspect, right? You have cameras everywhere. Why would you give that up? It's the perfect tool to control people. And to the Communist Party of China, that's the perfect tool. And I really think that's one of the reasons. But the second reason is, I think China is going to shift to a new way to fight COVID in the fact that they're not going to lock down cities anymore. They're going to do this. They're constructing these massive quarantine camps around every major city in China to the scale I've never seen before, right? And they construct them, it takes them like a month to construct. Once they're done, they can house up to hundreds of thousands of people at once, okay? We've already seen this for the past 3 years. This is not something new. But what I'm scared of, and I just tweeted this out today actually, you can follow me at David Zhang 360 on Twitter, where I talk a lot about China, but I'm afraid that the next stage of China's zero COVID fighting is just simply gonna be whoever tests positive gets shipped out to these quarantine centers across China, and they remain there until they die or starve to death. I don't exactly know what's gonna happen there. I don't know if these are gonna be, I mean, some of them were destroyed by the wind, others were, like this one was destroyed by the wind. You can see the inside of it, right? Pretty poor quality, like beds, and it's a very temporary construction, but I think the purpose, and this one was actually burned. Somebody, I think, set this one on fire. It was also a quarantine camp. So, of course, people are fed up with this, right? But to have these type of quarantine camps, to me, it indicates that the Chinese Communist Party is not giving up on zero COVID. They're going to make sure that the cities remain open, right? But anytime you test positive, you're guaranteed to be shipped off to one of these sites. Who knows what's going to happen to you there? Nobody knows the condition inside. From the videos we've seen for the past 2 years, people that have been shipped off to these things will stay there for, say, like 14 days. The conditions inside are things like lack of good food, bathrooms are disgusting, and you don't have access to quality medical treatments, right? So you can imagine you're not really going to a safe medical environment. You're actually just, you're sent to a place like a garbage dump site, pretty much. And that's what I'm scared of. Like, they're saying zero COVID is no longer going to be like this, whatever this current lockdown system will be. But in fact, all they're doing is just making you live in a, like, kind of erasing you as a person from the city population, right? Technically, you're still zeroing on COVID because you no longer have positive cases in the city and the city can remain open, right? The argument from the Chinese Communist Party, like, technically it makes sense because you're no longer having to lock down cities because everybody is free from COVID. But once you do test positive, you're then shipped off to this place to die. Some of the indications for this further is the fact that this is done. The I don't even know what to call him, but Hu Xijin is somebody, he's a commentator for a Chinese state media called Global Times. And he tweeted this out today. He says, it's been a long time since daily COVID-19 infections exceeded 10,000 in China, but there are only 98 severe cases, no new death for 5 consecutive days. Omicron is really becoming weak. China is unlikely to produce the humanitarian disaster that the West had in the past 2 years. And he also says, here comes the weekend again, but China's epidemic prevention strategy has undergone major adjustments. Most of the lockdowns have been lifted and people's mood is completely different. So some people shouldn't expect protests of last week's scale to come back. Okay? He is one of the state media's barking dogs. Whatever he says is essentially the direction given by a part of the propaganda department, right? So, of course, the voice here is saying that, oh, we're easing our COVID control. You no longer have to worry about protest, or they shouldn't be happening because now it creates a legitimacy for the regime to crack down on the protesters. Because now what you're doing, if you do go out and protest anymore, is the fact that you're just trying to, start a revolution, right? You're trying to undermine the government. You're trying to destroy the legitimacy or the support for the people. The people's will is with the Chinese Communist Party. What you're doing is anti-us, and then thus we have to arrest you, right? They can create this sense of like guilt because you're now protesting in an environment where we no longer have zero COVID. Why the heck are you still trying to shaken the stability of the society, right? So you're then being treated as somebody who is a criminal, and then they can deal with you. And we've seen videos of cops like basically going to homes of people who did go to the protest, and then they just arrest them, harass them, and force them to admit that they will no longer go attend these events because those things are threatening the stability of the regime. But basically, I think China is trying to do the pivot, right? It's not a exit, as the Washington Post says here, because I think at the end of the day, there's no way for a communist party to say that they were wrong. They would never admit that zero COVID was wrong. But what they're doing is they're taking these baby steps to try to say that, oh, whatever was happening in the past was a stage. It was the necessary adjustments to make now to a new stage, which we will go through a period of unrest, and we did for a week, but that's over now. No more protest. People should go back to living their life normally. And but the general ideas of zero COVID remains, right? You're still going to be shipped off to quarantine camps. You're still going to be testing. You still need that COVID passport app everywhere you go. And I really think that one of them, the idea is that the Chinese society, I think, if you take a look, when the West locked down, especially in the United States and Canada, it was very, very bad for people, right? Within a year or so of the lockdown, the entire society changed. Our economy is in shambles, supply chains terrible, right? People's way of life changed. Now, can you imagine China has gone through 3 years of lockdown continuously, right? The way of life, the way the society operates, its economy, economic structure, the way the political system works in China now is also fundamentally shifted. So it's not like they can just go back to normal, this so-called normal. What they're going to do now is Xi Jinping, I think, is going to utilize this special period to adjust China into a new stage of total societal control, meaning that the government will have so much power over them that in case they're preparing for a war with Taiwan, for example, they have the ability to mobilize people in a way like we've never seen before. If it is to crack down on internal dissent, right, from people who are angry at the government, they now have legitimacy established to control the people so that they can disappear silently without people noticing, because now protesting in China is into a stage of illegitimacy, right? But that's pretty much it for the aspect. Final thought, I think China is not really easing COVID. They're easing it in the sense that they won't be locking down or doing the mass amount of quarantine anymore, but still, the gist of zero COVID will continue to evolve as the way, because it provides so much power for the Chinese Communist Party over its people. All right, let's move on to our second topic, which is on this Georgia Senate runoff. Okay, so we know that on Tuesday, Georgia will have its Senate election, runoff election, and today is the last day for early voting in Georgia. And we now know, of course, there's a lot of campaigning happening throughout the week. But let's take a look at some numbers here. According to, this is Victor Shi, who is a Democratic young Gen Z personality, I think. He says, in 2018, the total early vote number in Georgia for the runoff election was 373,000. Now, only 4 years later, the number is expected to exceed 1.5 million. So that's 5 more times than the 400% higher, less than 5 times, 400% higher. So this wouldn't be possible without the tireless efforts of organizers and leaders like Stacey Abrams. So basically he's saying that the amount of voters who voted in early voting quadrupled since 2018. Okay, very interesting, meaning that there's more voter participation this time, right? Especially early voting. And here's some of the reasons. Before we get into that, but the campaign to get Warnock and Raphael Warnock to win the Senate race is going to be very, 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 very focused, because Democrats don't want the abilities of Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema to impact Senate Democrats' decision makings any more than they need to be. So we know that, of course, now given the Nevada and Arizona loss for the GOP, so of course Democrats maintain those 2 seats, they will have majority already. So that's not a problem. But the problem is, if there is a bill that they want to vote on, and either Kyrsten Sinema or Joe Manchin decide that they're going to side with the Republicans on it, right now in this current stance, Democrats do not have enough votes to pass it. So having Warnock back into Senate would actually alleviate a lot of that, because remember, Pennsylvania was once, before this election, was a Republican, but now it's flipped blue, so it now has a Democrat. Forgot his name, that's terrible. Who was Dr. Oz? Oh yeah, John Fetterman. Okay, so John Fetterman has actually secured a very important seat in voting for the Democrats. So now with this Georgia Senate race, we really have to focus on Warnock, because Republicans, even if they win this Georgia Senate runoff, they cannot have the majority. So for them, it is really about defending and preventing Senate Democrats from having one more seat, so that they have less challenges from Joe Manchin or Kyrsten Sinema. So basically, you have Obama coming out and campaigning for them. On the Republican side, you have a lot of people. But here's what the Hill says, right? First, it says a Dem victory would reduce Manchin and Sinema's leverage. The Senate, so that's what I was talking about. The Senate was split 50-50 throughout President Biden's first 2 years in office, with Democrats holding the majority only because Vice President Harris has the authority to break a tie. The math gave huge leverage to the two Democrats most likely to dissent from their colleagues, Senator Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. Neither senators was shy about using that influence. So remember, Manchin was a key figure in forcing the Biden administration to scale back the Build Back Better social spending, and then also to what is now known as the Inflation Reduction Act. And Sinema was the concession on taxation in the IRA. But here it says a 51-49 Senate would not destroy the influence of Manchin and Sinema. But it will significantly dilute it because now Senate leaders have the ability to kind of focus on one or the other, right? I think they had more success with Manchin in the end, since he did also side with Biden on the most recent bill. I think it was the Inflation Reduction Act. And here it says former President Trump has a lot at stake here because so he says the 45th president had a miserable midterm election with many of his most high-profile endorsers losing, and in the aftermath, GOP critics openly accusing him of having deprived the party of an expected red wave. So Herschel Walker's fate could ease or worsen that problem, because it was Trump endorsed for Herschel Walker to run this campaign, and he did do really well. Having been so close to his opponent, sitting Senator Raphael Warnock. But the problem is, if Trump loses Georgia this time, there's going to be an internal push from the GOP to say that Trump is losing ground, he will not become the nominee, and he won't have a chance to win the 2024 presidential election. But this time, without Governor Brian Kemp on the ballot, right? So remember the midterm election, Brian Kemp carried Herschel Walker's ballots for, I'd say, at least 2-3 points. Because Brian Kemp easily won his re-election campaign. Usually the governor will carry the Senate or House members on the ballot. And now the issue is in the runoff election, you don't have that, right? It's just Herschel Walker versus Raphael Warnock. And the polls are really, really close. And of course, Kemp is, I wouldn't say anti-Trump, but he's definitely not favored by Trump, right? And there's a lot more here. So we have the Senate committees, and they're much more important because considering senators, you also have to vote on the confirmation of judges. You also have to vote on some of the committee bills, right? So if you want to push a particular set of stances on the Senate committees, you have to have majority, right? So here it says, partisans on both sides have stressed the topic of Senate committees as they try to maximize turnout for the runoff. They have a point. Even though Democrats have had a de facto majority in the 50-50 Senate for the past 2 years, those numbers require committees to have an equal number of members from each party. In practical terms, that makes it easier for Republicans to pump the brakes on Democratic priorities. One more seat for Biden's party would change all that, giving Democrats the majority in every committee. And that's why the Senate race is so important here. Republicans, having already lost the chance to retake the majority, don't want to lose their committee powers as well. Walker himself told Newsmax in recent days, right now we've got a chance to make all the committees even. And Democrats face a grim Senate map in 2024. Remember, in this race, Republicans had more seats to lose, right, in the midterm 2022. In 2024, there's actually going to be 23 Senate seats to defend for the Democrats versus the GOP 10. And these GOP 10, I believe, are much easier to defend than this year. In place because there's much less swing state. Let's take a look. Actually, I think there's much less swing state Senate races than the 2022, but I have to find out. I'm not so sure on that. But so Democrats have 23 seats they have to defend, right? I hope this time GOP would spend more money on key races, like what they didn't do in 2022. But for that, you have to remember the midterm. 2018, Trump didn't lose the Senate. 2022, Biden didn't lose the Senate. So 2024 becomes that much more important. And of course, given that it's a presidential year, we can't discredit the amount of influence a presidential nominee would have over the particular Senate race and the House races, even the governor's race. And for example, in 2024, I know that they're going to challenge Manchin and John Tester for the re-election campaign, because I know there's already somebody in West Virginia from the Republican Party already running or declaring to run, the fact that they're going to try to unseat Manchin and Montana's Tester. So also there's a seat in the Senate race in Ohio where Senator Sherrod Brown has defied a historic shift toward the GOP before, but because of J.D. Vance's win, could we see a switch back? That's a very important thing to know. And also, there's also going to be about the result, how Georgia is going to transition from traditionally a red state to now potentially a swing state, more bluish purple than reddish purple, right? Very interesting given the fact that Governor Kemp won very with a big margin. The last time we had a Senate race was in 2021, which was the runoff then. Both Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue from the Republican Party lost. Both the Democrats candidates advanced and became senators. Very interesting, politically speaking, because they're not a trifecta, right? When you have all of the state, governor, Senate, and also House belong to one party, and then you also have senators from different parties than the governor as well. So it will be interesting to see where Georgia goes, especially given the fact that Atlanta is very blue. It's a liberal city, but there's more rural areas in Georgia where that's really, really red. So let's see how that goes, because if Georgia flips flips blue in 2024, the grim reality of Republicans winning a presidential race is actually pretty real, in that they likely would have to find another state, right? Florida is becoming more red, but losing Georgia is definitely not a good thing. So, but that's pretty much it for the Georgia Senate race. I have no prediction because I think, honestly, the chance of the GOP taking that is very slim. I think that's just how the things go right now with so much more attention focused on 2024. I personally don't even have a lot of interest with the 2022 runoff election because I think now everybody's understanding that no matter what they do in this midterm runoff, the overall results won't change. And people are more eyeing who's going to be House Speaker. Is it going to be McCarthy or somebody else in January of next year? And whether what they can do, like investigate Hunter Biden in the House, trying to solve the inflation issue, all these things with China, etc. What's going to happen there? I think the attention is shifting. But we'll see on Tuesday, which is coming up very soon. Anyways, that's it today for the live stream. Thank you guys so much for watching. And make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on your notification as we have new content pretty much every single day. Also like this video so more people can watch it. And thanks again. Comment below what you think about our live stream and if you're watching on YouTube about our video. Thanks so much. Take care.